The number was 760-733-9969, and at one point people all over the world knew that number by heart. But let me back up. The phone booth was installed sometime in the 1960s. The exact year is a little fuzzy depending on who you ask, but most accounts put it around 1960. And the reason for it was actually pretty practical. The phone booth was installed sometime in the 1960s. The exact year is a little fuzzy depending on who you ask, but most accounts put it around 1960. And the reason for it was actually pretty practical. Out in that part of the Mojave, between Baker and the Nevada border, there were a handful of small mining operations. Cinder mines mostly. They were pulling volcanic cinder out of the ground for use in construction, landscaping, that kind of thing. The miners working those operations were miles from any town, miles from any other phone. If something went wrong, equipment broke down, someone got hurt, a truck didn't show up, they had no way to call anyone, so Pacific Bell put a phone out there, ran a line to it from a junction several miles away, standard service, nothing unusual about it, just a utility company doing what utility companies do. And for about 30 years, that's all it was. A phone in the desert that miners used every once in a while. Most of the time it just sat there baking in the sun, collecting dust. The cinder mines eventually slowed down and some of them closed. The phone booth became even more isolated than it already was, but Pacific Bell kept the line active. The bills got paid, barely, and the phone kept working. Then in 1997, a guy named Godfrey Daniels found out about it. Daniels was from Arizona. He was into desert exploration, the way a lot of people in the Southwest are. He'd read about the phone booth in a zine called Desert Rat. There was a short mention of it, just a few lines about a phone booth standing alone in the Mojave, miles from anything. And something about that grabbed him. Not the phone booth itself, but the idea of it. A working phone in the middle of nowhere. Who would answer it? Who would call it? What would you even say? Daniels put up a website. This was 1997, so we're talking early internet, GeoCities era. The site was simple. It had a photo of the phone booth, the GPS coordinates, and the phone number. He called it the Mojave phone booth. And then something happened that nobody expected. People started calling. At first, it was just a trickle, a few curious people who saw the website and figured why not. They'd dial the number and let it ring. Usually, nobody answered. The phone was in the middle of the desert, after all. The chances of someone being there to pick up were close to zero. But Daniels started driving out there. He'd camp by the phone booth and wait for it to ring. And when it did, he'd answer it. He'd talk to whoever was on the other end. Sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes for an hour. Strangers calling from New York, from Texas, from London, from Tokyo. People calling just to see if someone would pick up, and someone did. He started documenting the calls on his website. Who called, where they were from, what they talked about, and the site started getting traffic. A lot of traffic. This was the kind of weird, human, slightly absurd thing that the early internet loved. It was the perfect story. A phone ringing in the desert, a stranger answering, two people who would never meet in real life connected for a few minutes by a payphone in the middle of the Mojave. By 1999, the phone booth was famous. It had been written about in newspapers, talked about on radio shows. People were making pilgrimages to it. They'd drive hours into the desert just to stand next to it and wait for it to ring. Some people camped there for days. And it wasn't just Americans. People were calling from Germany, from Japan, from Australia. The phone number spread across internet forums and message boards in every language. At its peak, the phone was ringing almost constantly, day and night. People would arrive at the booth after driving for hours and find it already ringing before they even got out of the car. There's a documentary filmmaker named John Smith who drove out there in 1999 and shot footage of people hanging around the booth. In one clip, a guy picks up the phone and it's someone calling from Italy. They don't share a language, they just laugh and try to communicate for a few minutes and hang up. And that kind of captures the whole thing. People left stuff at the booth, notes, photos, trinkets, Someone put a guest book in a metal box next to it. There was the American flag at one point. Someone planted a cactus nearby. It became this little shrine in the desert. Not to anything religious, just to the idea of connection in an empty place. The visitors started causing problems, though. The phone booth was on land managed by the National Park Service. It was technically within the Mojave National Preserve, which had been established in 1994 as part of the California Desert Protection Act. The land around the phone booth was home to desert tortoises, which are a threatened species. And suddenly you had dozens of cars a week driving off-road through tortoise habitat to reach a payphone. The Park Service wasn't happy, neither was Pacific Bell. The phone was racking up maintenance issues from the increased use and the desert conditions. The line would go down and people would complain. Pacific Bell was getting calls from reporters asking about a payphone in the desert, and they didn't really know what to say about it. Then on May 17, 2000, someone from Pacific Bell drove out into the desert and removed the phone booth. No announcement, no warning, they just pulled it out. The concrete pad, the booth, the phone, all of it, gone. When people showed up after that, all they found was a patch of dirt where it used to be. Someone put up a small makeshift memorial, a few rocks arranged in a circle, a note or two. The reaction online was pretty intense. People were genuinely upset, which is kind of remarkable when you think about it. It was a payphone, a piece of utility equipment. But it had become something more than that, and people felt like something had been taken from them. Godfrey Daniels kept the website up. He wrote a kind of eulogy for the phone booth. He said something along the lines of, "The phone booth was proof that people want to connect with each other, even when there's no reason to, even when it makes no sense." There were a few attempts to get it back. Someone started a petition. It didn't go anywhere. The Park Service said the removal was necessary to protect the desert environment, and honestly, they had a point. The tortoise habitat was being damaged. The off-road driving was tearing up the desert pavement, which takes decades to recover. It wasn't sustainable. But here's the thing that sticks with me. The Mojave phone booth existed for about 40 years. For the first 30 of those years, nobody cared about it. It was just a phone. Miners used it. Maybe the occasional lost traveler. It just sat there in the desert doing its job. Then, for about 3 years, it became one of the most famous phones in the world. Thousands of people called it. Hundreds drove out to visit it. It was written about in newspapers and magazines across the country. And then it was gone. And now it's been gone for over 25 years. The concrete pad is gone. The line is gone. The utility pole probably isn't even there anymore. If you drove out to the spot today, there would be nothing to see. Just desert. Same as before. But people still know the number. 760-733-9969. You can find it on the internet in about 5 seconds. People still talk about it on forums and social media. There are Reddit threads about it. The documentary footage is on YouTube. The website Daniels built is archived. A payphone in the desert that most people never visited and that hasn't existed for a quarter century, and it's still part of the culture, still part of how people think about the Mojave. I think the reason it stuck is because it touched something real. The desert is the emptiest place most Americans will ever see. It's the closest thing we have to true nothing. And in the middle of that nothing, there was a phone that could ring, and if it rang and you were there, you could pick it up and hear another human voice, someone you'd never met, someone who was just curious enough to dial a number and see what happened. That's it. That's the whole thing. And somehow, that was enough to make it matter. The spot where it stood is about 7 miles down a dirt road off Aiken Mine Road, which itself is a remote road within the Mojave National Preserve. If you go out there today, you won't find anything, but people still go. They still drive out there and stand where the phone booth was and take a photo of nothing. And I think there's something kind of beautiful about that. People making a pilgrimage to an empty spot in the desert where a phone used to ring. If you ever called the Mojave phone booth, or if you ever visited it, I'd love to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. And if you know of anything else like this out in the desert, something that shouldn't be there, or something that was there and isn't anymore, let me know. There's always more to find out here. Thanks for listening.